I'm Aaliyah Brooks, 47 years old. And 3 years ago, my white boss looked me straight in the eye and said, "You people don't belong in management." The words hit me like a physical blow, stealing my breath and making my hands shake. But what happened next taught me something even more important about my own power, resilience, and the difference between performative allyship and real change. If you've ever felt invisible in spaces where you've earned your place, or questioned whether you truly belonged somewhere you'd invested your heart and soul, please let me know where you're watching from and subscribe to join others who understand this experience. I never intended to become the owner of a mid-sized marketing firm in downtown Portland. When I first walked through the glass doors of Creative Solutions Inc. 15 years ago, I was a 32-year-old account coordinator with an MBA from Northwestern, 2 years of agency experience, and dreams bigger than the small apartment I shared with my college roommate. The company felt like everything I'd been working toward: a boutique agency known for innovative campaigns, a collaborative culture, and what seemed like genuine diversity initiatives. During my interview, I met Sarah Chen, the only other woman of color in a leadership role, and felt that familiar flutter of possibility. Maybe this would be different. Maybe this would be the place where I could build something meaningful. The agency occupied 3 floors of a converted warehouse, with exposed brick walls covered in award plaques and creative campaigns that had shaped local and national brands. The smell of fresh coffee from the lobby espresso machine mixed with the excitement of creative energy. During my first week, I attended a company meeting where the founder, Robert Harrison, spoke passionately about building bridges through authentic storytelling and representing the full spectrum of human experience. I scribbled notes furiously, energy crackling through my fingertips as I imagined the campaigns I could create, the clients I could serve, the difference I could make. This felt like home. Those first 5 years were everything I'd hoped for and more. I threw myself into every project with the intensity that had carried me through scholarship applications, late-night study sessions, and the careful navigation of being one of only 12 Black students in my MBA program. I arrived early, stayed late, and volunteered for the challenging accounts that others avoided. The work energized me, developing campaigns for a local nonprofit serving immigrant families, rebranding a tech startup founded by 2 Black women entrepreneurs, creating messaging that actually reflected the diversity of our city. My supervisor, Jennifer Walsh, praised my fresh perspective and natural understanding of multicultural markets. I felt seen, valued, appreciated. By year 3, I was promoted to senior account manager with a salary that finally allowed me to move into my own place, a one-bedroom loft just 10 minutes from the office. I decorated it with campaign mock-ups and industry awards, including the Regional Diversity and Marketing Excellence Award. Our team won for a campaign I'd spearheaded. Robert personally handed me the award at our holiday party, telling everyone how Aaliyah's innovative approach opened new markets we never knew existed. I believed him. I believed in the company, in my place there, in the future we were building together. The golden period lasted another 2 years. I had my own small team, a corner desk with windows overlooking the river, and what felt like genuine friendships with colleagues who included me in lunch plans, weekend barbecues, and impromptu happy hours. My annual reviews were stellar. Robert mentioned me in company newsletters and client presentations. When major prospective clients visited, I was always included in the meetings, my presence a visible symbol of our commitment to diversity and innovation. I started planning for the senior director role that everyone said would be mine within the year. I researched professional development conferences, identified potential mentors, and even toured a few houses in the suburbs, imagining a future stable enough for the family I hoped to build. But there were moments, small at first, that would later crystallize into a pattern I couldn't ignore. Comments about my hair when I wore it natural, so bold, followed by uncomfortable laughter, being interrupted in meetings and watching my ideas attributed to colleagues. The assumption that I was the diversity expert on every campaign, even those having nothing to do with multicultural marketing. The way conversations sometimes paused when I entered rooms, followed by overly bright greetings, being asked to mentor every single new hire of color, while watching my white colleagues focus solely on their individual career advancement. At the time, I filed these incidents away as growing pains, the price of being a pioneer in spaces that were still learning how to be truly inclusive. The morning that changed everything started like any other Tuesday in September. I arrived at 7:30 a.m., 30 minutes before most of the team, and settled into my routine of reviewing overnight emails while the office slowly came to life around me. The familiar sounds of elevator dings, coffee brewing, and cheerful morning greetings created a symphony of productivity I'd grown to love. I was preparing for a presentation to our biggest potential client, a national retailer looking to refresh their brand for younger, more diverse markets. This was the account that could establish me as a true leader in the company, the kind of opportunity I'd been building toward for 7 years. Growing up in Cleveland, my grandmother used to tell me, Aaliyah, baby, you're going to have to work twice as hard to get half as much, but that doesn't mean you're worth any less. She'd lived through segregation, watched my grandfather build a successful construction business despite deliberate obstacles, and understood the particular challenge of maintaining dignity while proving yourself in hostile spaces. My parents, both teachers, had reinforced these lessons while adding their own education is your armor, excellence is your weapon, and never let anyone convince you that you don't belong where your skills have earned you a place. These teachings shaped how I approached every challenge at Creative Solutions. When I noticed I was being held to higher standards than my white colleagues, I met them. When I realized I had to document every idea and contribution more carefully than others, I did. When I sensed skepticism about my capabilities, I overprepared and overdelivered until doubt became impossible. It was exhausting, but it was the price of progress, or so I believed. My professional strategy had always been to excel so undeniably that bias couldn't take root. I researched every client exhaustively, arrived at meetings with detailed notes and creative solutions, and followed up on every conversation with thorough documentation. I built relationships carefully, finding common ground with colleagues while staying true to my values. I spoke up in meetings, but not too much. I challenged ideas, but diplomatically. I was authentic, but strategically so, code switching seamlessly between the confident professional voice that commanded respect and the approachable warmth that helped others feel comfortable. This delicate balance had worked for 7 years, until it didn't. The day everything became clear started with Robert's assistant asking me to join him in the main conference room after the morning team meeting. He wants to discuss your career development, she said with the kind of smile that felt genuine. I felt a familiar excitement building. This had to be about the senior director position. I'd been exceeding all my targets, my client retention rate was the highest in the company, and I'd just brought in 3 new accounts through personal networking. I grabbed my portfolio and walked into the conference room with the confidence of someone who'd earned their place at every table. Robert sat at the head of the polished oak table, scrolling through his phone with the casual authority I'd grown accustomed to. The late morning light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows created geometric patterns across the surface, and I chose a seat where I could maintain comfortable eye contact. Aaliyah, he began, looking up with what I initially read as paternal warmth. I wanted to talk to you about your future here. I'm excited about that conversation, I replied, leaning forward slightly. I know the senior director position is opening up, and I believe I've demonstrated, well, that's exactly what I wanted to discuss. His tone shifted, becoming more measured. You're incredibly talented. Your work with diverse markets has been valuable. But I've been thinking about the leadership structure we need moving forward, and I'm not sure that particular role is the right fit. The words landed strangely, like a song played in the wrong key. I'm not sure I understand. My performance reviews have been exceptional, and you've mentioned multiple times that I was being groomed for senior leadership. Robert leaned back in his chair and something in his expression hardened. You have to understand the reality of our client base. Most of our major accounts are traditional companies with traditional leadership. They're more comfortable working with people they can relate to. It's not personal, it's just business. The room seemed to shift around me, sounds becoming muffled as if I were underwater. Are you saying they don't want to work with me because I'm black? I'm saying you people don't belong in management roles with our type of clients. You're brilliant at the diversity stuff, the multicultural campaigns, but our bread and butter accounts need someone who fits their expectations. Jennifer Walsh is going to be a better fit for senior director. She has the background these clients expect. The words hit me like physical blows, each syllable landing with devastating precision. You people, the phrase echoed in my head, carrying decades of exclusion, assumptions, and casual dismissal. My hands began to shake, and I felt heat rising from my chest to my face. The familiar conference room suddenly felt foreign, hostile, like enemy territory I'd somehow wandered into by mistake. Robert, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, are you aware of how that sounds? Are you aware that what you just said is discriminatory? His expression didn't change. Ear? I'm trying to be honest with you about the business realities. This isn't about discrimination. It's about fit. Maybe you'd be happier at a company that specializes in diversity marketing. I sat in that conference room for 30 seconds that felt like 30 minutes, processing the complete dissolution of everything I'd believed about my place in this company. The awards on the walls, the collaborative culture, the diversity initiatives, All of it suddenly felt like elaborate theater designed to mask the truth Robert had just revealed. I wasn't a valued leader being groomed for advancement. I was a token, useful for specific purposes, but never intended for real power. I need to think about what you've shared, I said finally, standing on legs that felt unsteady. Thank you for your honesty. As I walked back to my desk, everything looked different. The diversity posters on the walls seemed performative. The casual conversations happening around me felt exclusive. The very air seemed thinner, as if the space itself was rejecting my presence. I gathered my things mechanically, told my assistant I was taking the afternoon off for a doctor's appointment, and drove home in a haze of shock and growing anger. That evening, I called my sister Denise, a civil rights attorney in Chicago who'd warned me repeatedly about the difference between diversity theater and real inclusion. Alia, she said after I recounted the conversation, I need you to write down everything you remember, word for word. And I need you to start documenting everything moving forward. This isn't going away. I spent the next 3 hours writing, remembering, connecting dots I'd been unconsciously avoiding. The pattern became unavoidable, being excluded from informal networking events, watching less qualified white colleagues receive opportunities I'd been promised, being consistently undervalued despite overperforming. The company I'd given 7 years of my life, my creativity, my loyalty, had never seen me as anything more than a tool to fulfill their diversity quotas. But lying in bed that night, staring at the ceiling while my mind raced, I felt something building alongside the hurt and anger. It was a familiar feeling, the same determination that had carried me through every challenge I'd faced. My grandmother's voice echoed in my memory, when they show you who they really are, believe them, but don't let that stop you from showing them who you really are. Over the following weeks, I began to see creative solutions with new eyes. I noticed how the diversity initiatives were all surface-level diverse faces in marketing materials but homogeneous leadership teams. I observed how conversations about culture fit consistently favored people who looked and thought like the existing leadership. I documented instances of microaggressions I'd previously rationalized away, being asked to speak for all Black people during campaign discussions, having my ideas questioned more rigorously than those of white colleagues, being praised for being articulate, as if it were surprising. The first major incident happened during a client presentation 3 weeks after my conversation with Robert. I was presenting a campaign concept for a fitness brand targeting young professionals, a demographic I'd researched extensively. Midway through my presentation, Tom Mitchell, a white colleague with 2 years less experience, interrupted to suggest modifications that were virtually identical to what I'd just proposed. Instead of correcting him, Robert nodded enthusiastically. Great thinking, Tom. Alia, let's incorporate Tom's insights into the final proposal. I felt my jaw clench as I watched Tom receive credit for my work in real time. After the meeting, I approached Robert privately. Did you notice that Tom's suggestions were identical to what I'd just presented? Robert looked genuinely confused. Think you might be oversensitive about this. Aaliyah, collaboration means building on each other's ideas. Collaboration requires acknowledging whose ideas are being built upon. I replied evenly. Maybe you need to be more assertive about claiming ownership, he suggested, as if the problem were my communication style rather than his selective attention. That night, I started a detailed log of every meeting, every interaction, every instance of bias I observed. I began recording conversations when legally permissible and saving emails that revealed the company's true attitudes about diversity and inclusion. The documentation process was emotionally exhausting, reliving each slight, each dismissal, each moment of disrespect. But I knew it was necessary. The second incident occurred during our quarterly all-hands meeting 6 weeks later. Robert announced several promotions, including Jennifer Walsh's elevation to senior director. As he listed her qualifications, many of which were achievements I'd accomplished first or better, I felt the eyes of my colleagues flicking toward me, curious about my reaction. Some looked sympathetic, others seemed uncomfortable, but no one spoke up about the obvious injustice. After the meeting, Sarah Chen, the only other woman of color in leadership, pulled me aside. Aaliyah, I'm sorry. I know this is difficult. Did you know this was coming? I asked. She looked uncomfortable. I heard rumors. I tried to advocate for you, but she trailed off, the unfinished sentence heavy with implication. But what? They said you were better suited for specialized roles, that your strengths were in niche markets. Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper. Aaliyah, I've been here 12 years, and I've never made it past director level. I don't think they ever intended for either of us to reach the executive team. That conversation shattered my remaining illusions about meritocracy at Creative Solutions. If Sarah, with her impeccable credentials and 12 years of exceptional service, had never been allowed to advance beyond a certain level, what hope did I have? The company's ceiling for people like us was clearly defined, regardless of performance or potential. I began reaching out to other employees of color, both current and former. The stories I heard were heartbreakingly consistent, promising starts followed by gradual marginalization, excellent performance reviews that somehow never translated to advancement, and eventual departures when the emotional toll became unbearable. I discovered that in 15 years, Creative Solutions had never promoted a person of color to the executive team. The diversity they marketed so proudly was purely cosmetic. 3 months after my conversation with Robert, I requested a formal meeting with him and the HR director to discuss my career development. I came prepared with documentation of my achievements, performance metrics that exceeded those of recently promoted colleagues, and specific examples of my leadership capabilities. I also brought my sister Denise, introducing her as my career advisor. Robert, I began, I'd like to revisit our conversation about advancement opportunities. I've exceeded every goal we've set, brought in significant new business, and demonstrated leadership capabilities consistently. I'd like to understand what specific criteria I need to meet for promotion to senior director. Robert exchanged glances with the HR director, Janet Morrison, before responding. Aaliyah, as I mentioned before, it's not just about individual performance, it's about fit with our client base and our company culture. Can you define what you mean by fit? Denise asked, her attorney instincts immediately honing in on the discriminatory language. Janet jumped in quickly. We look for leaders who can represent our brand effectively across all client relationships. Some of our more traditional clients prefer working with account leaders who share their perspectives. Are you saying that clients have specifically requested not to work with Black account leaders? I pressed. I'm saying we have to be realistic about market preferences, Robert replied. It's not right, but it's reality. Denise leaned forward. So you're acknowledging that you're making personnel decisions based on assumed racial preferences of clients. The room fell silent. Robert and Janet seemed to realize they'd said too much, their confident explanations suddenly sounding like admissions of discriminatory intent. I think we should table this conversation, Janet said quickly. Aaliyah, we value you tremendously. Let's think about other ways to utilize your talents. As we left the meeting, Denise grabbed my arm. Aaliyah, they just handed you everything you need. They admitted to racial discrimination in front of a witness. The question now is, what do you want to do about it? Walking to my car, I felt a mixture of vindication and devastation. Being right about the discrimination felt hollow when it confirmed that the company I'd devoted 7 years of my life to had never truly valued me. But beneath the hurt, I felt something else growing, a fierce determination to ensure this couldn't happen to others. That evening, I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of leaving quietly or filing a traditional discrimination complaint, I began researching a different kind of response. I started investigating Creative Solutions' financial position, client contracts, and market vulnerabilities. If they saw me as a threat to their client relationships, I would become one, but not in the way they expected. I discovered that Creative Solutions, despite their prestigious reputation, was struggling financially. They'd lost 3 major accounts in the past year. Their overhead was unsustainable, and Robert's lavish spending on office aesthetics had created serious cash flow problems. Most importantly, they were actively seeking an investor or buyer to help stabilize their operations. I called my uncle Marcus, who'd built a successful investment firm in Detroit after experiencing his own share of corporate discrimination. Aaliyah, he said, after I explained my situation, sometimes the best response to being told you don't belong is to buy the place and set new rules. What followed was 6 months of careful planning, financial maneuvering, and strategic relationship building. I reached out to former Creative Solutions clients who'd left due to dissatisfaction with service, discovering that several had been seeking an agency that truly understood diverse markets. I connected with other marketing professionals of color who'd left the industry due to similar experiences and found they were eager to build something different. I also began documenting the company's financial struggles, their pattern of discrimination, and the exodus of talented employees of color. The picture that emerged was of a company living on past reputation while systematically undermining its own potential for growth and innovation. The confrontation I'd been building toward finally came during the company's annual strategic planning retreat. Robert had chosen an exclusive resort in the mountains, the kind of place that made everyone feel sophisticated and successful. The entire leadership team was present, along with department heads like myself. The setting felt appropriately dramatic for what I was about to do. I waited until the final session, when Robert was presenting the company's 5-year growth plan. As he clicked through slides about expanding into emerging markets and building authentic connections with diverse communities, I felt the irony burning in my chest. This was a company that couldn't authentically connect with the diverse talent in its own office. Robert, I said, raising my hand as he finished his presentation, I have a question about the growth strategy. Of course, Aaliyah, what's on your mind? I stood up, feeling the eyes of every colleague on me. I'm curious about how you plan to authentically serve diverse markets when you've systematically excluded diverse voices from leadership positions. The room went silent. Robert's confident smile faltered. Aaliyah, I'm not sure this is the appropriate forum for. Actually, I think it's the perfect forum. I continued, my voice steady and clear. Everyone in this room should understand the reality of how this company operates. I walked to the front of the room, pulling out a folder I'd brought with me. For the past 6 months, I've been documenting patterns of discrimination at Creative Solutions. I have recordings of conversations where racial bias was explicitly stated. I have data showing that no person of color has ever been promoted to the executive team in 15 years. I have testimony from former employees about why they really left. Janet Morrison started to speak, but I held up my hand. I'm not finished. I also have documentation of this company's financial struggles, client departures, and the growing reputation in the industry for being out of touch with modern markets. Robert's face had gone pale. Alea, whatever you think you're proving, I'm proving that Creative Solutions is failing because it refuses to embrace the very diversity it claims to value. You've lost clients because you can't authentically reach their target demographics. You've lost talent because you create hostile environments for anyone who doesn't fit your narrow definition of leadership. And you've lost credibility because the gap between your marketing and your reality is becoming impossible to ignore. I opened my folder and began distributing copies of a document I'd prepared. This is a proposal for new ownership and leadership of Creative Solutions. A group of investors I've assembled is prepared to purchase the company and implement genuine diversity and inclusion practices. The room erupted in confused murmurs. Robert stood up, his face red with anger. This is completely inappropriate, Alea. You can't just. I can. And I am, I said calmly. You told me I don't belong in management. I'm here to prove you wrong. Jennifer Walsh, who'd been promoted to the position I should have had, looked stunned. Alea, what are you saying? I'm saying that sometimes the best response to being told you don't fit is to change the entire environment. My investor group includes several former Creative Solutions clients who are eager to work with an agency that truly understands diverse markets. We have financing in place and we're prepared to make an offer that addresses the company's current financial difficulties. Sarah Chen spoke up from the back of the room. Who else is involved in this? Several former employees who left due to discrimination, current employees who've expressed frustration with the company's direction, and industry professionals who want to build something better, I replied. People who understand that authentic diversity isn't just good ethics, it's good business. Robert's voice cracked slightly. Alea, you can't be serious about this. I've never been more serious about anything in my life, I said. You created this situation by systematically excluding and undervaluing people like me. Now I'm offering a solution that benefits everyone, including those of you who are willing to embrace real change. The proposal I presented wasn't just about ownership transfer, it was a comprehensive plan for transforming Creative Solutions into a genuinely inclusive company. We would implement transparent promotion criteria, create mentorship programs for employees of color, establish partnerships with minority-owned businesses, and restructure client relationships to prioritize diversity and inclusion. Tom Mitchell, who'd taken credit for my ideas months earlier, raised his hand tentatively. What would happen to current employees? Everyone would have the opportunity to be part of the new vision, I replied. Those who embrace the changes and contribute to our mission of authentic inclusion would thrive. Those who prefer the old way of doing business would probably be happier elsewhere. The meeting dissolved into chaos as everyone tried to process what had just happened. Some colleagues looked shocked, others impressed, and a few seemed genuinely excited about the possibilities. Robert and Janet huddled in urgent conversation, while Sarah Chen caught my eye and nodded with what looked like pride. As people filed out for lunch break, several colleagues approached me privately. Marcus Williams, a junior art director, said, Alea, I've been thinking about leaving because I never saw a path forward here. This gives me hope. Even some white colleagues expressed support. Amy Patterson, who'd always seemed like a genuine ally, said, I've watched you be treated unfairly for years. If this means real change, I'm interested in being part of it. The afternoon session was tense but productive. Robert and Janet attempted to control the narrative, suggesting my proposal was premature and that the company was already committed to diversity initiatives. But when pressed for specifics, their promises sounded hollow compared to the concrete plan I'd presented. By the end of the retreat, it was clear that momentum was shifting. Three department heads expressed interest in joining the new ownership structure. Two major clients who'd been considering leaving indicated they might stay if the company truly transformed. Even some investors who'd been skeptical of Creative Solutions' old model were intrigued by the potential for innovation. The negotiation process took 3 months. Robert initially refused to consider the offer, but as the company's financial situation worsened and more employees expressed support for change, his position became untenable. Janet Morrison, surprisingly, became an ally in the transition, later admitting she'd been frustrated by the company's resistance to meaningful diversity initiatives. The moment I signed the ownership papers was surreal. Sitting in the same conference room where Robert had told me I didn't belong in management, I officially became the majority owner and CEO of Creative Solutions, Inc. The irony wasn't lost on me, but it felt more like justice than revenge. The first year of new ownership was challenging but transformative. We implemented comprehensive bias training, restructured our hiring and promotion processes, and created employee resource groups that had real influence on company policies. We also completely overhauled our client approach, positioning ourselves as the agency that could authentically reach diverse markets. Because we were authentically diverse, the results exceeded even my optimistic projections. Within 18 months, we'd increased revenue by 40%, attracted 12 new major clients, and reduced employee turnover by 60%. More importantly, we'd created an environment where people of all backgrounds could thrive and advance based on merit rather than bias. Jennifer Walsh, initially resentful about the changes, eventually became one of our strongest advocates. I thought I'd earned that promotion, she admitted during a one-on-one meeting 6 months after the transition. But now I realize the old system was unfair to everyone. I'm a better leader now because I'm working in a truly collaborative environment. Robert, who stayed on as a consultant for 6 months to ease the transition, struggled more with the changes. He eventually left to start his own firm, taking his old-school approach with him. I heard later that he was having difficulty attracting both talent and clients in an industry that was increasingly valuing authentic diversity. Sarah Chen was promoted to Chief Creative Officer, a position that had never existed under the old leadership structure. "Aaliyah," she said, during her first week in the new role, "you didn't just change this company. You changed what I thought was possible for people like us." The transformation went beyond personnel changes. We redesigned our office space to be more inclusive and collaborative. We established partnerships with HBCUs and other minority-serving institutions to create internship and mentorship programs. We became vocal advocates for industry-wide changes in how agencies approach diversity and inclusion. Most significantly, we began tracking and publicly reporting our diversity metrics, creating accountability that the old Creative Solutions had always avoided. Our leadership team was now 60% people of color and women. Our client campaigns consistently won awards for authentic representation, and our employee satisfaction scores were among the highest in the industry. The ripple effects extended far beyond our company. Other agencies began reaching out to learn about our transformation process. Industry publications wrote articles about our model, and several competitors started implementing similar changes. I was invited to speak at conferences about leadership, entrepreneurship, and creating inclusive workplaces. But perhaps the most meaningful change was personal. For the first time in my career, I worked in an environment where I didn't have to code switch, where my ideas were valued from the moment I expressed them, where advancement was based on merit rather than bias. The chronic exhaustion I'd carried from constantly proving my worth began to fade, replaced by the energizing feeling of building something truly meaningful. 2 years after the ownership transition, I reflected on how dramatically my life had changed. The woman who'd been told she didn't belong in management was now running a successful agency and mentoring other women of color who were breaking their own barriers. The transformation felt both surreal and inevitable, as if everything in my career had been leading to this moment of creating change rather than just adapting to bias. The lessons I learned through this experience reshaped my understanding of power, persistence, and the difference between equality and equity. I discovered that sometimes the most radical response to exclusion is inclusion, not just demanding a seat at the table, but building a better table where everyone can thrive. I also learned that authentic allyship requires more than good intentions. It requires action, accountability, and sometimes uncomfortable conversations. The colleagues who truly supported change were those willing to examine their own biases and actively work to dismantle unfair systems, even when it didn't directly benefit them. Most importantly, I learned that my grandmother was right. I did have to work twice as hard for half as much, but she was also right about something else: that hard work, combined with strategic thinking and community support, could create opportunities that didn't exist before. If you're watching this and you recognize yourself in my story, whether you're someone who's faced discrimination or someone who's witnessed it and wondered how to help, I want you to know that change is possible. It requires courage, planning, and persistence, but transformation can happen. For my fellow people of color navigating predominantly white spaces, document everything. Keep records of your achievements, your contributions, and unfortunately, the instances of bias you encounter. Build relationships with others who share your experiences, and don't try to navigate these challenges alone. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong. You're probably right. And remember that your worth isn't determined by others' ability to see your value. For white allies watching this, understand that true allyship requires more than passive support. It means speaking up when you witness bias, even when it's uncomfortable. It means examining your own privileges and using them to amplify marginalized voices. It means supporting policies and practices that create equity, not just equality. And it means understanding that performative diversity without systemic change is harmful to everyone. The most important lesson from my experience is that we all have more power than we realize. I thought my only options were to accept discrimination or leave quietly. I discovered a third option: fundamentally changing the system that created the problem. Sometimes the best response to being told you don't belong is to create spaces where everyone belongs. Creative Solutions Inc. isn't perfect. We're still learning, growing, and working to be better every day. But we've proven that businesses can be both successful and equitable, that diversity isn't just a nice to have, but a competitive advantage, and that change is possible when people commit to doing the hard work of transformation. If my story resonates with you, I encourage you to connect with others who share your experiences and your commitment to change. There are organizations working on these issues in every industry and community. Look for mentorship opportunities, whether as a mentor or mentee. Support businesses and organizations that demonstrate genuine commitment to equity. And most importantly, never let anyone convince you that you don't belong where your talents and hard work have earned you a place. The future I'm working toward is one where no one has to choose between authenticity and advancement, where diversity of thought and experience is valued as the asset it truly is, and where success is measured not just by profit margins, but by how well we create opportunities for everyone to thrive. That future isn't guaranteed. It requires each of us to commit to being part of the solution. But it's possible, and it's worth fighting for. Because when we create spaces where everyone can bring their full selves to work, where merit is truly the measure of advancement, and where inclusion is authentic rather than performative, we all benefit. Thank you for listening to my story. If it moved you, please share it with others who might need to hear it. And if you're ready to be part of creating change in your own workplace or community, I'd love to hear about your journey. Together, we can build workplaces and communities where everyone truly belongs. Remember, you have more power than you know, more support than you realize, and more potential for creating change than anyone who's tried to diminish you ever wanted you to understand. Use that power. The world needs what you have to offer, and you deserve spaces that celebrate rather than tolerate your presence. Let's build those spaces together.